Alright, here we are in iRacing in the Corvette GT1 car for a little test drive against AI. And I am starting last. We're at Barber Motorsports Park, which is my home track and one of my favorite tracks, so I figured why not. Also, I love Corvettes, so this car is pretty fun. This car also has traction control, which helps a bit in how iRacing drives, so we'll talk about that. I am using VR, and sorry, for some reason the mouse cursor was on the screen even though it was not on my screen, so I don't know what happened there, but anyway, apologize, it's like right in the middle. As you can see, it's from the left eye perspective. It's relatively clear. Hopefully it's stable enough for you to watch. Obviously recording in VR is tough, but let's get on to the game. So graphically, iRacing is pretty good. I think it's solid, especially for such an old engine. I know they've updated it a few years back and they continue to make improvements, but I think it looks pretty good. I think it represents what you want in a racing sim as far as what you see on the screen, and it's clear. For the most part, it's clear. The lighting is good, and the models of the tracks and the cars are really good. Like, the track models are probably maybe the best. They are super good, and the car models as well are always very detailed and authentic looking, and so you get that feel here. There's no weird over the top effects of any kind, and so in that sense it's somewhat simple, but it's it's very very good for what you need it to be good at, and it runs pretty well. I think on monitor this game runs really well for today. So now I will say the graphics settings options are some of the most convoluted, unorganized looking set of things you would ever imagine. So you can see there I got a little bit out of control, and you can see how quickly the car snapped. Just quickly then moving on to the sounds. I mean, this car sounds amazing. I think that's to be expected of a big V8, right? But certainly the game sounds good. But let's talk about the physics for a bit. So the suspension modeling in iRacing, I think across most of the newer cars, is all really good. I feel like the way they model suspensions over curbs and bumps and just the road in general it's right up there, maybe the best. It's very, very good. You really do get a sense that the suspension is there under you moving, and whether you're driving an oval car or an open wheel car or a road car, almost, they've got it nailed down. So suspension, vehicle dynamics is very good. I will say, to me, the cars feel some cars more than others, maybe a little too strangely pendulum feeling at times, where obviously you should have that sense of a center of mass and a rotation about that. But sometimes, okay, I want to talk about the tires real quick right here. So you can see I might have overshot the entry to the hairpin just a slight amount. Got the car a little bit sideways. You can see I'm shaking my head there, but just a little bit. It wasn't extreme. The tires completely turned off, and I think it was probably from temperature. I think the surface temperature of the tire got overheated, and essentially the tires did not come back to any point of grip until seconds later. You can see the black car in front of me just disappeared before I got any grip, and if I would have gotten onto the throttle any harder than I did, the car would have certainly come around, because the tires were gone and they were turned off at that point. So just moving from physics to tires, this is my biggest problem continually with iRacing. Every time I come back to it, doesn't matter how many years later it seems, the tire model is improved. It is definitely better than it was when I first bought this car back in maybe 2013 when it released, somewhere in that range. It was almost undrivable because the tire model was so slippery. But you still just don't get a sense of confidence of the tires really ever. Now, I'm sure if you spend hundreds of hours, like most iRacers do, then you adapt to it, you get used to it, and you realize that, okay, I can do this. And then all of a sudden, when someone else comes and says the tires feel weird to you, you think they're crazy because you've spent hundreds or maybe thousands of hours adapting your brain to the fact that these tires don't operate like a tire in any other sim, and I don't think that much like in reality. They just turn off, and when they turn off, they don't turn back on for periods of seconds. And so there's going to be cases when you're driving all the time where if you're trying to apply some longitudinal grip requirement and lateral grip requirement at the same time, especially, the tires don't handle that well. And I think some of it has to do with surface temperature and how they've modeled it. I think they did some of that on purpose because they don't want the cars to slide for some, for some good reason, and maybe a little too scared of it for some reason. But whatever the reason being, either that or they just can't figure it out, but the tire gets over the limit and it does not recover for a period of time. And so every time you get into a car, at least for me, I lose all confidence in the sim. And almost assuredly, I'm going to spin the car in very strange, random ways several times before I figure out where the limits are. And so what that leads you to is essentially not being able to overdrive the car. And to me, if you're one of those drivers who likes to approach learning how to drive a car, or even your driving approach is to use a little bit of slip angle and to learn how to go fast by pushing the limit and overdriving, you're going to find it very frustrating in iRacing because you just almost can't approach it that way. You always have to approach a car from the side of underdriving and building up speed slowly. And maybe in the ideas, in the sense of this being a sim and not reality, where in reality you have much more limited time, and so I think much more drivers in reality approach it from the perspective of, let me find the limit and then back it off. Even, the idea that it's a sim, you do have unlimited quote-unquote time, does give you the ability to drive it and learn it that way, but it's just not very fun and it's not confidence inspiring. So I don't like the tires in iRacing still today. I still think they're probably some of the worst. If they would make their tires a little bit more like a set of Corsa tires, or R-Factor tires, or LMU tires, or Rennsport tires, or maybe not all the sims, but a lot of them, or AMS1 tires, this sim would probably be dominant. It would just destroy everyone else, and I don't know why they haven't done that. So that leading into the force feedback, which feels quite good. I think it's not maybe the best. I don't think it compares to Assetto Corsa's force feedback in all the detail it gives you about the limit of grip, but it's pretty good, and it feels definitely better than a lot of other sims, and it communicates, not just the suspension, but it does communicate somewhat of what the tires are doing. So I think the force feedback is pretty nice, and works quite well, on any modern day direct drive wheel. Yeah, we talked about the sounds a bit. The sounds are very good. I think this is one area where they put a lot of time and effort in, and it shows. The cars sound good. They also are just intuitive in that you hear the engine RPMs, and they correlate to when you need to shift, so you can easily learn in most cars, I think, when you need to shift. Also the tire sounds, and I mean the tire sounds are kind of one of those things that iRacing has chosen to stand out, but I think it's for good reason, because one of the things we need as sim drivers, because we don't have seat of the pants to know the limit, is we need to be able to feel it in the wheel, visually see it, and hear it, and iRacing does that pretty well with the tire scrub sounds. You do kind of get a sense of when you're reaching the limit, at least from the audio. Maybe not from the tires, but at least from the audio you can get a little sense of that. Yeah, as far as content, I mean, I don't have most of the content in iRacing. I don't have very much content at all, actually. Really, just the free content is quite good, and you can have a lot of fun with it, other than the fact that you're going to be stuck in Rookie Series for a lot of it, which is going to be frustrating. But You can move into D-Class and still, I think, have quite a bit of free content use. And I say free content, obviously you still got to pay for a membership, but yeah, there's almost every car that you can imagine in the road racing and oval racing, and then now they're even branching into some, you know, off-road kind of stuff. So the content is certainly all there. All the big tracks, even little tracks, are there. You know, things like Barber, like this, which are not modeled in a lot of sims, are here and available. So the content, yeah, it's certainly got it. It's got the content. So this was an AI race also, and just to you know, talk briefly about that, they spread out really far in this race. I kind of had them spread with their, you know, ability. I had them spread out a bit because I wanted to see how that worked. The AI is okay. They do kind of line up pretty good, but they will defend and they will pass you back. Sometimes they do crash and then pile up the whole field. So I'd say they're, you know, it's on par with most other sims, which, you know, when you think about it, iRacing didn't have AI for a long time, and they did finally implement it, and it's pretty good. So also, I will say an additional thing that you can't do in just about any other sim is you can go create your own AI drivers. You can name them, you can give them, I think, numbers. I don't know beyond that if you can paint cars for them, but essentially you can build your own grid of AI. If you wanted to represent some historic thing, you could do that. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty good part of the sim that is available now. It just doesn't make sense for most people to pay for a service like this and you know, only race AI, right? And so yeah, we move on to the multiplayer side of this, and I want to show the screen. This race is about over, but certainly iRacing, at least in America, is by far the most populated, and I think worldwide, it's the most populated multiplayer sim racing title, right? So there's no doubt about that. The player base is the most populated. You can jump in and find races at just about every time a day and in several different types of cars. Now, with that being said, I mean, they have kind of fragmented even their own service quite a bit just with all the content they have. So it's like, it's nice that all the content is there, but certain cars at certain times just, you know, are more popular. And so a lot of times the new cars are popular, so that kind of breeds into that. Well, you got to buy the new stuff if you want to have big fields of cars.
Chicken flag, chicken flag. Great job, you did really well.
Okay, y'all, here we are to score iRacing today. After the drive that we did and the nice race at Barber, looking at graphics to start with, I think iRacing looks quite good. It's very functional in that it gives you what you want. It's clear. There's a good amount of clarity. They updated the engine not too long ago, but several years ago. It also runs very smoothly, and of course it works very well in triple screen and in VR, as you saw in the video there. So it's not overly flashy. It's certainly not going to win any awards for graphics, but I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. I think it's very solid. Physics-wise, car handling, car dynamics, suspension, damping, setups, etc., iRacing is superb. I think the physics part of iRacing is very well done. The cars handle curbs very well. They handle oval racing. They handle even, you know, off-road stuff, and then of course road racing of different types of cars, all the way from a small Formula car up to Formula One and every type of GT car you can imagine, almost, you know. So the physics in iRacing are extremely good. Now, they're not perfect, but I'm going to score them very close to perfect and putting physics at a 9, because I think it is that good. Now, conversely, on the side of tires, iRacing falls very short, in my opinion. It was way worse years ago. I remember trying iRacing when it first released, and then trying it up through 2013, I think, was the last time I played the game seriously, and then I took quite a long break. And even up to that point, I remember the cars being practically undrivable. To me, I like to drive at the edge of grip or slightly over the limit. That's how I like to learn the edge of grip, is by going over the limit, and this, you just can't do that in iRacing. So it's very frustrating to me personally. Certainly, the tires have improved. You can slide them more. They do allow more slip, but whether it's overheating or on the surface or whatever, they just turn off, and you're just always afraid to push. Still to this day, it feels the same to me, so, or similar. So I'm going to rate the tires pretty poor, below average. Really, it's the biggest heartbreak about iRacing still to me to this day, apart from the cost, but we're going with a 4 out of 10. Now, as force feedback in iRacing, conversely, I think is actually pretty good. As long as the tires are not turning off, the force feedback is conveying to you pretty good, realization of what's going on with the car dynamically and how to control it. So I like the forces. It's a simple-ish approach. There's not a lot of noise in the wheel, but the forces are all there. So I think it's quite solid, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 here. The sounds in iRacing, I think, are extremely good. Again, I think the cars sound mean, like you heard that Corvette, how mean it sounded, which it ought to sound like that, and it does. It sounds mean at an idle, and it sounds mean at wide open throttle. They did that very well in just about every car I've driven. I'm sure there's some cars where maybe the sounds aren't as good as some of the newer cars. But also, the game does all the ambient sounds very good. It does the tire scrubbing sounds quite well, which is a big help considering the tires themselves don't really convey a whole lot of information to you. So overall, the sounds in iRacing are top notch. I think I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10. They're not absolutely perfect, but they're very close. Now, content-wise, quality and quantity of the content is really unmatched. If you put all the cars on jacks and take all the tires off of them, they're the best cars in any sim, just about, right? They model everything to the T. The tracks look amazing. The cars look amazing, and they do everything right in this aspect. So to me, this is an easy 10 out of 10 here. Now, iRacing does actually have single player. It does actually have AI, and it's actually pretty good AI. I did have to redo my race that I showed you 3 times, I think, because the AI kind of kept doing weird things, and some of the collisions in iRacing are a bit of a problem, which is something we'll talk about in a minute. But because of that, and just because of the quirks with the AI, they're not perfect, but they're pretty good. And what's really nice is you can actually do AI championships, and you can do prescribed ones that iRacing already has in templates with like official series, or you can go make your own series, and you can go make all of your own AI. You can give them all your own ratings. So you could go make Dale Earnhardt and Mark Martin and Rusty Wallace and all those guys from the 90s, which I'm sitting here thinking about doing, because that would be awesome. Something like that. So you could do that. So in that sense, it's really good. And obviously they've also got time trials now, and they've got, I guess, just typical offline testing as well that you can do. So there is single player in the game, and I think it's quite good. The AI is actually pretty solid to race against. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 here. Now, multiplayer player base. Again, this is one thing iRacing does better than anyone else, right? They're the biggest dogs in the fight, and yeah, you're always going to get players. So now, when you're talking about the quality of the players, I think iRacers tend to be pretty jaded and mentally maybe struggling, and that possibly could be due to the tire score. It's like got everyone on edge who plays the game. Now, obviously, people have also invested a lot of time and money, so there's a lot of tension built in to iRacing. But the player base is certainly a 10 out of 10. You can find good races all the time. Well, let's take the good and maybe say you can find races all the time within your ranking. And speaking of ranking, multiplayer ranking, again, everybody knows what an iRating is. If you are into sim racing at all, you know what an iRating is. You know what a safety rating is. They've got the class system as well, which, you know, whether you like that or not, as far as a progression system, it gives you something. It's all there. There's championships, there's seasons, you know, 4 times a year. So it's got everything. It's a 10 out of 10 in the ranking system. This, you know, no other sim has found a better way to do it. Now, cost. This is where iRacing struggles, maybe more than the tires. This is obviously quite subjective. There is some free content with the sim, but of course you also have to pay a service fee, so it's not really free content, and you really can't do very much. I looked at the Formula 1600, I think I showed you, and it was going to cost somewhere around $100 for me to buy the tracks required to race a rookie level car for a season. That doesn't include the monthly fee that it will cost me for those 3 months or whatever as well. So it's very expensive, and you know, the content may be great quality, but it is not cheap. And to me, it's just way too much. It's way too expensive for the average person. And I know every iRacer is going to say, oh, hobbies are expensive. Yes, but in comparison to all the other sims available, which have content that is as good or better when you consider the tire issue with iRacing, I can't get behind it. I'm gonna be a little bit nice. I'm not gonna give it a 1 here. I'm gonna give it a 3, because you could, for maybe $40 or $50, you could go buy some things with a slight discount, or if you found a deal or something, and you could put together enough to do a series, or at least most of a season, in a certain car. But just know, everybody knows this at this point, iRacing ain't cheap. It's not cheap. Alright, there it is. iRacing comes in with a score of 79. It just pips RBR. Surprisingly, honestly, I kind of thought RBR might actually win the whole thing, but you know, it is what it is. So iRacing does eke out a 1-point advantage right now. Next up will be Race Room in the next part of the series, so I hope to see you in that one. And until then, happy sim racing, and we'll see y'all later.